Hello everybody and welcome to this video of Massira. Massira is a new PlayStation 4 indie title that was released this week, and don't worry if you haven't heard of it before. I think most people were in your position. As far as I can tell, it doesn't even have a database listing on Metacritic, let alone any reviews or anything like that. So it really has come out of nowhere and it doesn't have a whole lot of press and coverage behind it. It comes to us from a Spanish studio and it's an interesting title. I wanted to do this video because it raises a whole lot of questions or topics for discussion about how we look at video games and about what video games should be and what they should do. So yeah, this game is a really good example of a lot of things that I personally think about video games. So it became a good new release to talk about. So I'll be talking about that while also talking about the game itself. Now, Massira tells a story that is very politically loaded in this day and age. It's a story about a young girl and her grandmother who are looking to escape Syria to find a new home and new life in Europe after their village is bombed and the girl's parents are killed in the war. And that is a very loaded topic. That is a topic which is the cause of a lot of very angry debates in Europe and elsewhere at the moment, and how we treat refugees, whether we invite them into our country, what we do about the situation in the Middle East, which is creating such a huge humanitarian crisis, is a topic that is well beyond the scope of any one game. But I think the value of Massira as a game is that it really distills a lot of the debate down to being a story about two people. And that's important because when you think about it, when you think about the way that the conversations about this topic have been politicized, one of the things that's happened is that we stop seeing these people as people. They become numbers, they become an abstract object of debate as opposed to a face and a name. And I think it's important that the arts as a whole come together to really, again, represent these people and remind people that they are humans, because that's what art is particularly good at doing. Art is really there to tell human stories and to encourage people to think about people as humans. So I think that for this particular game, I think the intent behind it is really valuable and really important. And for me, that was the reason that I wanted to play it in the first place. And while I've been so, I guess, disappointed in how it's turned out, because unfortunately the game itself doesn't really achieve what it's looking to do. So what I mean by that is the whole point of this game is to focus you in on the story of the characters, of the grandmother and of the daughter. Much like Bury Me My Love was really focused on making sure that you're listening to the story of the husband and wife couple as they discuss back and forth over the in-game kind of messaging system. Unfortunately, because this game has so many frustrations in it, and it has so much kind of attempts at gameplay to really kind of distract people from that core story, a little bit of that is quite lost. So, for example, the puzzles, there are numerous puzzles through the game, and some of those puzzles are downright aggravating in how they work. Other puzzles are just so simple they become quite boring to work through. And in that time that you are sitting there trying to figure out the puzzle, or you're going through the motions to complete the puzzle, you're losing your attention's focus on the characters and of the story and of their situation and all that kind of stuff. It's too distracting from what the game is trying to do. Similarly, there's these platforming sections, and these platforming sections are just terrible. They feel like they're taken straight out of the PlayStation 2 era, where the characters have really floaty jumps, but the platforms themselves are still quite small because the developers back then wanted their games to have quite a bit of challenge to them. So they made the platforms quite small, gave the characters the kind of floaty jump style that they needed to work in 3D, and it frustrated a lot of people. Those platformers from that era were not always, or often they were quite bad. This game feels like those PlayStation 2 era platformers, and I am not the world's best at platformers. I can get through them, but the number of times I needed to restart a lot of those platforming sections in order to get through them just pulled me straight out of the story, and it became this great roadblock to work through. And when you're trying to tell a really emotive story about characters, those roadblocks, those distracting moments of kind of gameplay, for want of a better word, really don't help what the game's trying to achieve. With that being said, I did still play this game through right from the start to the finish. Firstly, because I still found just enough in there to be invested in the characters on balance. I still cared about what was going on with them, and I wanted to see how their story finished. I was really rooting for them to make their escape and find a new home in Europe. And the game helpfully does tell you, your progress with a map between each kind of level, so you can see how far you're getting through the game. It's not the world's longest game in the first place, so it doesn't feel like it's too painful, I guess, to deal with, as long as you can kind of sit through those less pleasant sections. But the other reason that I was quite interested in continuing to play this game through to the end was the actual the visual style of it and the abstract nature of it. I mean, this game does a really great job of using kind of low polygon characters to really strip the identity out of each of the protagonists and all the people around them, which sounds counterintuitive when I've just been saying that the game is all about kind of making you empathize with these characters. But in a way, it does build that empathy further, because you're made to understand again that through all the discussions that we have about these people, about the Syrian refugees, we're constantly reminded in this game that for the most part, these people don't get given a face. They don't have, they're just nameless kind of statistics for the point of political discussion. So the art style of the game really emphasizes that theme and does a really good job of it, I find. And it has also the kind of really surreal moments. There's one great example, which you would have seen in the video already, where you have to go and help a bunch of kids who are working in a sweatshop in Turkey building clothes or manufacturing clothes, and the sewing machines that those kids are kind of working with, those sewing machines look like dragons, and you've got to feed the dragon with the material for the clothing, and it has that really kind of sinister aura about it, and it makes you feel kind of uncomfortable to see. It's very abstract, it's very surreal, but it's very emotive and very evocative, that's when this game's at its best. That puzzle isn't really a puzzle at all. It's more just a slightly interactive bit of storytelling, but it's one of the most potent parts of the game. These kind of platforming sections, which you also would have seen in the video footage, they don't really further the story. They don't really do much for the game. And while I know that there are a lot of people out there that hate walking simulators or visual novels or whatever they want to call them because they're not gameplay enough, I think when you're trying to tell a serious story, in a lot of cases, trying to make it too gameplay-like can actually detract from the experience. And that's why there's this great contrast between this game and Bury Me My Love, because Bury Me My Love came out on the Switch just earlier in the year. It's not even, it'd be 1 month, if not less, old on the Switch release. So if you didn't play it on the phone, and I know a lot of people out there don't like playing games on their phones anymore, the first console release of that game is quite recent. And there's this great contrast between that game and this game. Bury Me My Love is a game that isn't really a game, and to listen to some of the trolls on the comment sections of my reviews of that game, it's not a game and therefore it's trash and all that kind of stuff. This is definitely a game, but it's a less effective telling of a story about Syrian refugees than Bury Me My Love is. So, you know, it's a nice attempt. It's certainly a nice attempt, this game. And I really feel bad for being critical of it, because the developers have tried to do something so important, and you've got to respect them for that. You've got to thank them for that, really. They've done something that a lot of developers would not be brave enough to try and do, and tackle a really serious subject. But unfortunately, yeah, this one is a good example about how gameplay can actually inhibit a good story, and perhaps if this was a walking simulator, it was a little bit less challenge orientated in the way it does its platforming in particular, it might have been a more effective game. So thank you very much for watching this video. I want to still say support this game, because it is trying to tell such an important story, and if you can get through the gameplay bits of it, what it is saying and what story it is telling is just so, you know, it's so human. It's so artful. It's a good example of the way that games are starting to develop as works of art and not just a bit of fun. So it's still an interesting thing. It's still a curious game to play. It's still a neat bit of art, and it's quite cheap anyway, so it's not a big hit to the budget. So thank you very much for watching this video. Certainly interested to hear your thoughts about how these kinds of serious games can work for you. And yeah, we'll see you at the next video.